Hi guys, welcome back again to Vanzi channel. As requested yesterday, today I'll share a list of FPS, or first-person shooter, games that can be playable on Winlator using your Android device. The following list is mostly played on powerful devices like the Snapdragon 8 Elite and Snapdragon 8 Gen 3. However, throughout the video, I'll include details about whether the games run well on mid-range and low-end devices. I also choose the following games based solely on what I consider to be the best. Okay guys, I think that's all I can say for this intro, and let's get started. First, Halo 3, featured in Halo the Master Chief Collection, concludes the original Halo trilogy, continuing the Master Chief's fight against the Covenant and the Flood. This first-person shooter game is also very playable for you to play on Winlator, especially for high-end devices from Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 to the highest. 2. Metro Exodus is a fairly heavy first-person shooter game. While it runs smoothly on high-end devices like the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 and higher, it runs very poorly on mid-range devices without root or a custom ROM. 3. Borderlands is a very lightweight first-person shooter game, offering stable FPS even on mid-range and low-end devices. You can apply the appropriate driver and DXVK settings for your processor type in Winlator. 4. Battlefield 4 is a 2013 first-person shooter game known for its large-scale multiplayer battles and dynamic environments. Not only does it run smoothly on Winlator for high-end devices, this game also runs very well, especially for users of mid-range devices, such as the Snapdragon 870. 5. Bioshock Infinite is also similar to the previous list. While it's still a bit heavy to play and experiences some FPS drops, overall, mid-range users can run it well, reaching 30 FPS and even higher. 6. System Shock is a 2023 first-person action-adventure game and is a remake of the 1994 game with the same name. This game is highly recommended for you to play on Winlator, especially since the game runs very well on all types of devices, starting from Snapdragon 695 to Snapdragon 8 Elite. 7. Titanfall 2 stands out from other FPS games due to its emphasis on verticality and movement. Pilots can traverse the environment with wall running and double jumping, adding a dynamic layer to the gameplay that is not typically seen in other shooters. This game is very playable for high-end devices. 8. Turbo Overkill is a fast-paced, retro-inspired first-person shooter with a cyberpunk aesthetic heavily influenced by classic shooters like Doom and Duke Nukem. This game runs very well, especially for high-end device users, without exception also for mid-range users. 9. ULTRAKILL is a fast-paced, ultra-violent, retro-inspired first-person shooter. It combines elements of classic shooters like Quake with the stylish combat of games like Devil May Cry. You can definitely play this game very smoothly on all mid-range devices that support the Turnip Mesa driver. 10. Back 4 Blood is a first-person shooter that focuses on cooperative gameplay, where players fight against hordes of mutated humans called the Ridden. By only using high-end devices, such as Snapdragon 8 Gen 3 or Snapdragon 8 Elite, this game is able to run quite well. 11. Half-Life 2 is a critically acclaimed single-player first-person shooter game. It's known for its engaging story, innovative physics-based gameplay, and immersive world-building. This game is very light to play on Winlator and is able to run on low-end devices and even runs on Mali GPU. 12. Wolfenstein II: The New Colossus is a first-person shooter game where players take on the role of William B.J. Blazkowicz, a resistance fighter battling the Nazi regime in an alternate 1961 America after the Nazis won World War II. This game runs well on Winlator using high-end devices. 13. Wolfenstein: The Old Blood delivers a classic first-person shooter experience with a compelling story, engaging combat, and a unique alternate history setting. This game is certainly very playable on Winlator, using mid-range to high-end devices. 14. Alien vs. Predator, commonly known as AVP, is a first-person shooter game that's light enough to play on a Winlator. Several users have tested the game on mid-range devices, and it runs very well and is very stable. You can also try it yourself on lower-end devices like the Snapdragon 695. 15. In addition to being able to run with FPS performance reaching 60 on high-end devices, Trepang 2 also runs very well, especially for users of mid-range devices with low settings for Snapdragon 860 to Snapdragon 870. Use the appropriate driver and DXVK for your processor. 16. Soulslinger Envoy of Death is a roguelite first-person shooter where you play as a gunslinger in Limbo. The game features fast-paced gunplay, supernatural elements, and a Wild West aesthetic. This game is definitely playable on high-end device like the Snapdragon 8 Plus Gen 1 or Snapdragon 8 Elite. 17. Insurgency, Sandstorm offers a challenging and rewarding experience for players who enjoy a realistic, team-focused, and strategic approach to first-person shooter gameplay. This game is not recommended to be played on low-end devices, but the game runs well on Snapdragon 7 Plus Gen 2 processors or above. 18. Prodeus is a light first-person shooter game you can play on Winlator. It even runs very well on Snapdragon 855 chipsets and above. I highly recommend this game, and be sure to use the appropriate settings. 19. Far Cry 4 is a first-person shooter action-adventure game set in the fictional Himalayan country of Kirat. It takes a powerful chipset to play this game very well, especially for users of mid-range devices such as the Snapdragon 870. 20. Bright Memory Infinite emphasizes quick and fluid movement, allowing players to seamlessly switch between shooting, swordplay, and using psychic powers. This game also running very well on mid-range devices or higher in Winlator. 21. Severed Steel is a single-player, first-person shooter game with a focus on acrobatic, stylish combat, and a unique one-armed protagonist named Steel. I don't know whether this game is capable of running on a mid-range processor or not, but it runs well on the Snapdragon 8th Gen series. Next. Left 4 Dead 2 is a cooperative, first-person shooter video game where players battle hordes of zombies in a post-apocalyptic setting. This game has been tested and runs very well for users of mid-range and even high-end devices. Next. PAYDAY The Heist is a cooperative, first-person shooter game where players participate in intense, dynamic heists as career criminals. This game also runs very smoothly on both mid-range and high-end devices. You can achieve up to 60 FPS on the Snapdragon 8 Gen 3 or Snapdragon 8 Elite. Next. Dishonored 2 is a first-person action-adventure game with stealth and assassination elements, set in a steampunk world. So far, the game only runs very well and stable on Winlator for Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 and above. Next. Journey to the Savage Planet is a first-person shooter with an open-world concept and engaging gameplay. It's also guaranteed to run very well on Snapdragon 8th Gen 3 and above, with FPS reaching 60. Mid-range devices are likely to only achieve 30 FPS or less. 26. Dying Light is a first-person action survival game set in a zombie apocalypse. Players navigate a vast, open world, scavenging for resources and crafting weapons to fight or evade the infected. The game is optimized to run on both powerful and mid-range devices. Next. Necromunda Hired Gun is a fast-paced first-person shooter set in the Warhammer 40,000 universe, specifically within the underhive of the planet Necromunda. I can only recommend this game for you to play on a powerful chipset like Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 and above. Next. Forgive Me Father is a retro-style first-person shooter with a Lovecraftian horror theme, drawing inspiration from classic 90s FPS games. This is one of the very light FPS games for you to play on Winlator, and it runs very well. Next. Terminator Resistance is a first-person shooter game set in the future war scenario glimpsed in the Terminator films. This game only runs smoothly on devices with processors like the Snapdragon 8th Gen 3 or Snapdragon 8 Elite. However, you can try it yourself on your mid-range device. Next, Rage 2 is a fast-paced, action-packed FPS that blends intense gunplay with open-world exploration and vehicle combat, all set in a chaotic, post-apocalyptic world. This game is also very heavy to play in Winlator and only runs well on high-end devices. 31. Fallout 4 combines the fast-paced action of a first-person shooter with the character development and story-driven elements of a role-playing game. This cool game runs very smoothly on Winlator, whether you are using a mid-range or high-end device. Next, Serious Sam Siberian Mayhem is a first-person shooter and a standalone expansion to Serious Sam 4. The game features intense, action-packed gameplay with a variety of weapons, enemies, and large open environments. This game only runs well on Snapdragon 8 Gen 3 or above. Next, Doom 2016 is a very lightweight first-person shooter. It even runs at nearly 60 FPS on mid-range devices like the Snapdragon 8S Gen 3. Many other mid-range chipsets can also handle the game well, such as Snapdragon 870. Next, The Outer Worlds is a first-person science fiction RPG game. It features a strong narrative, player choice, and a dystopian future where corporations control everything. This game is still quite heavy for you to play on Winlator, but some other mid-range devices can play this game well. Next, Void Bastards is a first-person shooter with roguelite elements where players scavenge derelict spaceships for supplies in a randomly generated galaxy. This game has been tested and can be played smoothly on Winlator, especially for Snapdragon 8 Gen 3 chipset. 36. Metro 2033 Redux is a first-person shooter, survival horror, and stealth game known for its atmospheric and engaging story set in a post-apocalyptic world. Needless to say, this game runs very smoothly on Winlator, especially for users of mid-range to high-end devices. Next, Metro Last Light Redux is also very smooth to play, and apparently this series runs better than Metro 2033 Redux on mid-range devices like Snapdragon 855. Many have shared settings for this game, so you can find them on other channels. Next, Warhammer 40k Boltgun embraces the visual style and gameplay mechanics of classic 90s FPS games, with sprite-based graphics, non-linear level design, and a focus on running and gunning. This game runs better on Winlator if using high-end processor. Next, Killing Floor is a first-person survival shooter game that you should definitely play on Winlator. Not only does it run well on almost any device, but it also has virtually zero bugs and works optimally on Winlator, especially in the latest version. Next, Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2 is undoubtedly a very light first-person shooter game that's playable on a Winlator. For mid-range devices, especially the Snapdragon 855, you can use medium or low settings to ensure the game runs smoothly, reaching 60 FPS. 41. Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3 is also very light to play on Winlator. Almost all games can run it on low or medium settings. High-end devices can experience excellent performance at high graphics, reaching 60 FPS or even higher. Next, besides the two previous Call of Duty games, Call of Duty Black Ops is also arguably the lightest on Winlator. Several mid-range devices can run this first-person shooter game very well. Next, Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare is a first-person shooter game known for its realistic war zones and engaging storyline. You can even play this game very smoothly on the Mali Winlator, which has strong performance like MediaTek Dimensity. Next, even though Call of Duty World at War is a fairly light series to play, most Mali GPU users, especially those with mid-range devices, still have difficulty getting 30 FPS performance in the game. Next, Sniper Ghost Warrior 2 is a first-person shooter game that focuses on realistic sniper gameplay. Players take on the role of a sniper, engaging in covert military operations and using long-range rifles. This game running very well on powerful devices like the Snapdragon 8 Gen 1 or above. 46. Fear 2 is a first-person shooter at its core, featuring a variety of weapons and combat mechanics. It blends action with tactical elements, offering a dynamic and engaging experience. This game is very playable to play on Winlator. Next, Beyond Hanwell is a first-person survival horror game. It's an indie title set in an open-world, twisted version of Westminster, London, where anomalous entities are a reality. This game is guaranteed to run very well on almost all devices. Next, Battlefield Bad Company 2 is a popular first-person shooter released in 2010, known for its squad-based gameplay, destructible environments, and strong multiplayer component. This game is also one of the lightest to play on Winlator and supports Mali GPU. Next, Halo 4 Master Chief Collection is a fairly heavy first-person shooter. It likely only runs well on high-end devices. However, you can try it out on your device. Final list. Will is a fast-paced, retro-style first-person shooter developed by a small team, drawing inspiration from classic games like Doom, Quake, and Serious Sam. This game is quite light to play, especially for those of you who use mid-range or high-end devices. Alright guys, those are the top 50 best first-person shooter games playable on Winlator. While some of the games on this list are best played on powerful chipsets, like Snapdragon 8th Gen 2 or higher, you can also try them on your mid-range device with low settings and might get a stable FPS performance above 30. There are many other FPS games that run very well on Winlator besides this list, and you can mention them in the comments. Okay guys, if you think this video useful, don't forget to share this video to your friends, and also like this video and subscribe to Vanzy channel. I will see you guys in the next one. Bye!